And we're joined by John Young of Lifesigns. Thanks for joining us, John.
Thank you for having me, Lee. Lovely.
An absolute pleasure, mate. So, obviously, on the 8th, last Monday, on the 8th of March, you guys released Altitude. The CD landed with me on Saturday. It's not left my car since because I've been soaking it up to and from work. You guys this is such a good album. Don't get me wrong, I loved Cardiff, and that's when I've seen you guys at Rambling Man Fair. That's where I first caught you. My wife, she won't mind me saying she's the more progressive fan out of the two of us, but she's educated me over the years, shall we say. And yeah, so we watched your set at Rambling Man, so sort of the Cardington period that I came in your career, and I love Cardington, but I don't know, this just seems like a real natural progression from there to me. I don't know if it's the songs or if it's the production on it, but it just feels like a real step forward from there.
It's interesting, isn't it? We didn't think any of the three albums were that bad when we made them. And I think in general, the first one was very classic prog. The second, Cardington was a mix of there's a bit of pop in it and a bit of prog. And this is kind of a bit of pop, prog, and jazz fusion, which is something. It's kind of like a sort of, I don't talk about it, but it's kind of a little hidden passion of mine. And I think also, we were very lucky. It was a strange time. I mean, as you know, we've all been through this COVID trauma, but we came off the road last March, both with Lifesigns and my day job, which is Bonnie Tyler, and. So that all finished. Everything was done and dusted. Frosty decided to go his way at the end of that, which was fine. So then I said to Dave Bainbridge, we need a drummer, and all of a sudden, like 3 days later, we had a drummer. It was just almost as if, divine consequence of something came in, and there you go. Yeah. And so it's great. So Zoltan's from Sweden, but of course everybody's remote. So. Dave was also working in America at the time, so so we were sending files to each other across all the various oceans, and Steve and I were kind of the main point of call or port of call here in Leighton Buzzard, and so at the studio here we topped and tailed everything, but it wasn't like a normal process in a studio where you can go, oh, I don't like that bit, can you just do that again? It was kind of, people would send us files and then we'd go at them with the scissors, and then we'd have to incur their wrath as they realized that most of what they'd sent us had been cut away. And then gradually we honed it down to what we thought would work. And I think it was the same process really, Lee, as it's been with the other albums, which we're so pernickety. We are, it's all about the music. I mean, when people say to us, when's the album going to be out? We go, when it's ready. And this is the advantage of us being independent and having our own label and doing our own studios, is that we're not tied to anything. We don't have to format everything so it's ready at a certain period of time. And I think that worked really well, because when we got to the point where we were mixing and mastering, Steve and I weren't really happy with it. And we tried a couple of masters with a few friends, and it didn't work. And then Steve and I just looked at each other and go, you know what? I think we should remix it from the beginning again. And so, short of killing each other, which we managed to avoid, we did. And then even at the end of that, you have no idea, because you don't know. I don't know what you will think of it. I don't know what the reviewers will think of it. And Steve and I just look at each other blankly and go, well, I think it's okay. But the reviews have been spellbinding. We've been getting 10s from people and stuff like that, which is, for us is unheard of. And it's really lovely to be up there, in everyone's esteem. It's great.
No, man, like I say, you open up with the title track Altitude itself. Nice big 15-minute plus epic opener there.
Yeah, the single. I hear a single.
Definitely single length. It's definitely single length.
For sure.
And you go over an epic like that, and you do think, wow, where's the album going to go from here? And what I love is about your music, John, is what you were just saying, that you guys are always about the song, whether it's the 15-minute epics. Obviously, you got your shorter songs in there. I'm looking at like Gregarious, which is like 4 minutes. The next song on, but it always suits the song. Nothing ever seems rushed. Nothing ever seems stretched. It's just right for what's going on at that time.
Yeah, that's the plan. I mean, one of the things which not everybody's, it's not been easy for everyone in terms of, the song is in charge. Basically, that's the deal. You come in and you work in life signs. You can be the greatest musician in the world, and let's be honest, they pretty much are. From my point of view, and I've worked with a few. So I've never worked with better musicians than this. But I do have to kind of stamp my foot a little bit and say it's about the song. And generally, everyone gets that. It's not usually a problem. And I think it's good because you're listening to people who are outstanding, but they're not overplaying, and so you get this quality which is fabulous. And one of the things we can do by people not overplaying, Steve and I in the mixing, we pick out every instrument of the 4 main instruments, and we listen to them all through every track and make sure you can hear them all the way through the track. So if you want to follow the bass, or if you want to follow the drums, if you want to follow the keyboards, whatever, you can hear it all the way through, and once we know that those are all accessible, nothing is missing anywhere, and we send it to everybody. Obviously, we sent the drums out to Zoltan. He said, well, I think it could do with a bit more kick, or we could try this or whatever, and it seemed to work, and I think that there's a liveliness about it. One of the things is that, some of the topics, Ivory Tower is quite dark, and
that one particularly stood out to me. Ivory Tower, really, that was one that, driving on the way to work, and when Ivory Tower kicked in, that's going up a bit more. That was one that particularly stood out, I must say.
Yeah, we've been responsible for quite a lot of crying in cars and stuff, and whatever. And people lengthening their journeys to work and stuff like that. People have been writing to us, which is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. But also,
I was last night, I've been driving and listening to this back and forth, and my wife's desperate to nick the album from me so she can listen to it on the way to work. And I'm like, no, I'm speaking to John Tuesday night. I've got to soak up a bit more. And I came in from work yesterday, Monday evening, and she went, "You were a bit later than normal." And I went, "Yeah, well, I was halfway through Fortitude, and I just sat in my garage and waited for like the last 5 minutes of it to end before I went in the house."
Funny thing with Fortitude, I don't think you're alone, Luke, because the reports we've been getting back is that the last 3.5 minutes have to be listened to no matter what. So it seems that everyone's kind of sending us this. It is, yeah. We knew, it was funny when we were doing Fortitude, and I don't mean to muck, I'm sure you're going through the tracks, but Steve and I, when we got to that last section, I remember the first time we played it through in the studio and listened to it properly with the speakers and everything else, and we just looked at each other on the end and Steve went, "That'll do." and yeah, I think it hits the spot. It's great, and I do feel that there's nice light and shade through the whole thing. And the whole idea with Life Signs albums is we generally try and make them feel uplifting. Even on the first album, there's a song called "At the End of the World." It's the happiest song you'll hear about the end of the world. So we generally try and make it that it's something that makes you feel better, like going to see a good movie or whatever, that kind of thing. So it's the work.
Well, I've always thought with you guys that because there's always great depth to your music, like I say, whether it's the longer epics like Altitude or short songs like Gregarious or whatever it happens to be, that every time I've listened to it, it's and I'm sure it's going to happen even more so the more and more I listen to Altitude, but we'll put it this way, it's been 4 years since Cardington, and I still listen to that and hear things I didn't quite come to the foreground on first, second, third, fourth, fifth listen, whatever happens to be. So I think there's always going to be that way of discovering stuff.
That's intentional to an extent. We feel that for us the important thing is that, and especially in, dare I say, in current times, that music should have substance and depth.
Definitely.
And it was like that when I was a kid, growing up listening to Yes and Genesis and everything else. You keep finding things in their albums, they would keep revealing themselves to you slowly, and we've tried to build that into all the albums, and it seems to have worked. It's sort of like, it's something that's very layered, and gradually it opens out. But it's quite funny when we go back into it, Steve and I, and sometimes if we have to do a remix of something or just go into a section of a song, like for instance Altitude, we'll go back into it. I'll take that part there, and then when I went to see Steve, I took 260 tracks of keyboards to him for that song. So then you go back in, and you'll find on track 157 there's something that goes me. And you go, what's that? Why is it there? And then we just sit and laugh about it, and then we play the track through, and you see that it has to be there. And so that's the beauty of looking back through the actual mix, is that you see all this stuff that you don't even really you know, you don't even really acknowledge that it's there, but it is, and that's the stuff that keeps revealing, you know. And I think the nice thing from my point of view is that the rest of the band kind of work on a similar principle. So, you know, whether it's the keyboards, whether it's the bass pedals, you know, whether it's the vocals. I mean, Lindsay was amazing on backing vocals on this, and so, you know, we've been very lucky. The right people to do the jobs. That's the thing. Yeah.
So was it yourself and Steve doing the key part of the songwriting on this then, or was it mainly yourself? Or?
No, it's just me. I write the songs, but I generally just go over with a map, really, of each song, and then there was a bit of a fight originally as to who was going to play second, because I don't think anybody wanted to go on second. So in the end, poor old Zoltan had to do that, and the drums went on next. And then it's a question of bass and guitar, because everybody likes to hear as much. I mean, I think for Dave especially, you know, you like to hear as much as you can of the song, so that you get the inspiration you need to give you that, you know, the way you would feel. It would be pointless, you know, Dave playing the solo on Last One Home from the drums. You know, that would be wouldn't be particularly inspiring. But I think in the end we found a way of doing it. And although, I mean, to be honest, it took us completely away from everything that was going on in the world, COVID-wise and everything else, because we were so engrossed in making the album all year that we've only really now come up for air, you know. And so it was a good way of getting us through that year, if you know what I
mean. Good project to focus on, mate.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, can't complain.
That's cool. And again, stunning artwork on this one by Mr. Brett Wild again, mate.
He's
some of the producers for you guys.
Well, Brett and I go back a very long way. Brett was guitarist in a band I was in called Cathedral, with John Camp from Renaissance on bass and Tony Bodine on drums. And we were one of those bands that were kind of around at the same time as Duran Duran and all that kind of stuff. Quite musical, couldn't write a lyric to save our lives, but had some interest. You know, we managed to get we got a big deal off Warner Brothers. Nothing happened. We had various management companies that you know, the usual stories of doom, gloom and destruction, you know, and in the end it all fell horribly apart. But Brett and I stayed in touch, and you know, aside from being, you know, an amazing guitarist, which he is, and a great he really understands music. When we started this project, it was just by accident. We had a painting that had been made for the first Lifesigns cover.
Okay.
It didn't really work. It was an artwork, but it didn't really work for me. And I remember saying to Brett, I really like one of your photos. And he said, which one? I said, the one of the village with the church in the middle. And he said, oh, that one. I said, yeah. I said, could we have that as the front cover? He said, fine. I said, that was a really beautiful photo. He said, yeah, I took that from the M6. So basically, he was in a car driving down the M6, and he took this picture of this church in a field, and that became the front cover. The problem is, of course, you have to understand now, for a lot of people who have now bought the record, you know, all these years later, the problem is they're driving down the M6 and all of a sudden our front cover comes into view. How we haven't been responsible for numerous accidents, I've got no idea. There's the car. Yeah, crikey. So, yeah, but he's brilliant. I mean, he can just, I don't know, he has a magic in the way that he works, and we're very fortunate to have him, really are.
You think his musicality leads into his art then?
I think it's the same for all of us, really. I think we're a very small team of people, you know. Julie, who runs the merch, and you know, we look after the record company. Steve looks after recording. You know, there's the band, and then we've got a number of people around that. It's a very bijou organisation, but everybody does it for the love.
Yeah,
you know,
that's what you want, though, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think in these times, that's quite rare. You know, I would say. I think also, you know, to come from. I don't think anyone gave us much of a chance back in 2013 when we started, because, you know, we did have a record deal, but we didn't like it very much. So we decided to go independent, and everyone said, well, that's you know, the end of you then. But it seems to have worked. And also we brought, you know, with the friends that we've made, both on, you know, going on things like Cruise to the Edge and stuff like that, the live gigs that we've done. I mean, we started playing to 30 people in a pub, you know, that's kind of how it worked. But these days, you know we can command a fairly good audience, and they're very, you know, the people who followed us and helped us along the way are wonderful supporters of what we do. So it's, you know, it's down to their effort as well that we're here, you know, without question.
What I liked on the obviously in the booklet of the album, you've got the people who went through the pledge campaign for it. I thought that was a cool touch, a cool nod to that.
Absolutely. We used to use pledge music, but obviously they went horribly bust. And again, it's the usual greed scenario kicked in.
That's a shame because it's such a good platform for a lot of bands.
Oh,
a lot of bands that used it in the days, and also equally, I know a lot of bands have got screwed over by it as well. But
yeah, well, I got screwed over by them, but for a solo project. But it was one of those things. I remember talking to some of the people there. I was really annoyed that they just weren't more open and honest about it towards the end. But you know, for me, I said, you know, you're fools, because you've been given this opportunity to do something that's really good, and it, you know, it cannot fail unless you become greedy. But they became greedy, you know. So what could you do? So in the end, we decided to kind of take that concept, and I suppose also to an extent, a number of people have said to us, "Are we like the new Marillion because we're doing it all ourselves?"
Yeah.
And I take that as a great compliment, because I think Marillion did a great job in that. And I'm hoping that we can emulate that. We're bringing in some new things, the way that we work, you know, the way that we work with the website. But we're very fortunate. Our website is also our shop, our sales tool, and so you can do everything there, you know. So in the end, we've kind of shied away from going down the normal routes. I mean, the way that we'll distribute is you can get downloads from us, you can get the CDs from us, and you can also get them from Amazon UK. But the vinyl will be available everywhere, you know. And I think by keeping our cards a bit closer to our chest, it seems to work well, you know. And also people feel they're more part of the community, which I love. It's great.
I think that's the thing. I think a lot of people, especially with people who are, well, I don't want to slag anyone off, but not a casual music fan, a proper music fan, not one like we were talking about mainstream radio before. And you know, one thing that astounds me is when people go, "I don't really like music," and I think you can't have just found what's right for you. It's like saying you don't like paintings, or you don't like, you know, you didn't. I hate nature. I hate anything that moves me. You know, I just don't get it. But
absolutely great. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, black and white. Absolutely. I disagree as well. I mean, what annoys me with, you know, and you obviously don't fall into this category, but you know, if you listen to mainstream radio at the moment, you know, you'll get somebody on there, and every record that comes on, if it's a new record, he or she will go, "I love that. It's great, isn't it? Yeah." And now the next record, "Yeah, I love that record." You know, it's like, oh, please, you know. And what I don't understand is that things like, you know, if you look at Simon Mayo and Mark Kermode doing the film thing on a Friday, it's in depth. It tells you what you need to know. It talks about films properly. It gives you the whole background to what you need to know to go and see a film, whether you like it or not, whether it's got, you know, which actors, which actresses. I still say actors and actresses. I'm sorry about that. But you know, that kind of thing. It'll give you the insights in that you need to know whether something's going to be. There's nothing like that in music now, you know, and I think we really miss it.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid, for me, it was. I mean, I wasn't old enough to stay up and listen to it, but my dad would and tape it for me. It was John Peel show, and you know, people like Peely was fantastic for it, because when someone was that passionate about it, I'm the same now. If a friend of mine, I like a lot of stuff, but there's stuff that I don't like. Obviously, you know, you don't like everything in life, but if a friend of mine is that passionate, or someone said, "Oh, Lee, you've really got to blah blah blah," I'll give it a spin if someone is that enamored and that passionate about it, because they're that about. That's what makes me go, well, there must be something in it. But like you say, when you just get that, "Oh, that's great," and you're like,
Well, I think because music has become throwaway, you know. I mean, if we often joked about if you made, and you know, I have to be respectful. There are some good records that get into the charts for sure, but you know, in general, if you look at it, you can say, how long is the record? You know, well, it repeats itself and repeats itself and repeats itself and it only lasts 2.5 minutes. So actually, there's only 20 seconds of music, you know, and then there's the same words repeated over and over again. So actually, there's only 10 words in the whole thing, and blah blah blah. And I remember going into London, and a friend of mine who's a guitarist had exactly the same experience a few weeks later, where I was invited to go and see a record company and go and have lunch with them, which I did. And I said, "I don't really understand why I'm here." And they said, "Well, because your music's great. We love it, you know." And I said, "Yeah, but you're not going to sign it." They went, "No, of course not, you know." And I said, so explain this to me." So as the conversation went on over lunch, which was very nice, in the end they turned around and said, well, to be honest, we only sign things that appeal to 3 to 5 year olds, and we're only looking for nursery rhymes. You know. Now, a friend of mine had exactly the same experience with a different record company 2 weeks later.
Wow.
And this is what is being fed to the population. So if you feed the population stuff that's only nursery rhymes, they're not going to be looking for depth or you know, or something that makes the hairs go up on the back of their arms, or, you know, something that moves them. Whereas, you know, I think it's nice. I mean, we've looked at some of the reviews that have come through, and for me, it's across the spectrum. You know, there was an American review that said we sound like, you know, kind of progressive Steely Dan. And there was somebody else that said it's very similar to UK, which is a band that I really loved and worked with, and things that, you know, things that I really rate. And it's nice when people say these things to you, but nothing like this is creeping into modern day culture. So it's a question of what is culture, isn't it? Is culture not on the radio? Because it certainly seems that that is generally the case. And I mean, I spoke to some pluggers about trying to get stuff onto the BBC, and they said to me, well, it can take anything up to 1.5 years. I said, but it's just come out, you know. Yeah, but it might take 1.5 years to get through all the channels and pay everybody and make sure everybody's all right. And, you know, I'm sorry, you know, for me, that's just diabolical.
Yeah.
So I agree entirely with you, Lee. You know, in the days of John Peel, I'm a bit older than you, obviously, but I mean, back in the day, John Peel, Tommy Vance, Alan Freeman, I used to call Alan Freeman at the BBC and send him cassettes. And then I'd ring him at the BBC and go, I like this bit, John, but that's not so good. And I'll maybe try this, you know. Where have they gone? You know, these people were fabulous, absolutely fabulous. And it just doesn't exist. You know, I don't know. I should put my soapbox away, shouldn't I? So
it's absolutely fine. I'm on the same box, mate. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
It's that thing where I was saying about, you know, when you're keeping things your way and distributing everything yourself. I think, like, we're going back to the pledge thing, like you say, they just ruined such a good platform. I mean, I don't know how many artists that I love and music I bought through Pledge because I thought, great, here's an artist that I love. Oh, I'm going to love the album. I think my turning point for me was years ago. I was at university and I went to go watch a band I liked, sort of teenage years. So a bit more into, it was a bit more sort of rap metal at the time, but a band I liked at the time called Happy. And I went to go watch them at their show, went to their merch store, bought their new album directly off of them. Loved it, great record. And then about 2-3 weeks later, I was in HMV and I saw the same album that I bought off the band themselves for like a tenner or whatever it was, for like 15 quid. And I was like, hang on.
Yeah.
Something's wrong here. And from then on, and I think when I think people who are true music fans, when they have that, we all want to feel like we're helping out the artist you admire. And when you've got that option to support them in a way where it's like, okay, cool, well, I can go. I mean, still to this day, I'd rather go buy from the band's merch than line someone else's pocket.
Yeah, I think the problem is that people are fed different information. I mean, I think there's some good things. Bandcamp is good.
Oh yeah, that's a great platform.
If it's a choice between Bandcamp and going directly to the artist, I'd go directly to the artist. You know, because you're cutting out all the middlemen there. But some people say, "Oh no, but it's really good for the artist." Well, not as good as going to the artist.
I was going direct to them there.
Yeah, so sometimes you have to point these things out, and of course that goes all the way down the food chain to Spotify. You know, which I have lambasted that company from start to finish because for me it's just piracy gone legal, and you know, I do not understand why, you know, the industry per se doesn't just put samples on there and then people have to buy the product. It would put so much more money in everybody's pocket. I don't get it. That's what we do. We just put a few samples on there and that's it. But of course, the problem that you have to an extent then is the other end of the scale is people expect it's free.
Yeah.
And now a lot of my friends, you know, I mean, obviously I've been a professional musician since I left school. So, you know, my friends, you know, I work in tours. We're all out on the road. We're all doing everything. So everyone said, well, it's a shame Spotify have come along because you can't make any money from recording anymore, but there's always touring. So then somebody invented COVID-19 and there wasn't any touring anymore, you know. So it's been really, really hard. There's also no furlough for any of the bands. No. Nobody gets anything, you know. So in the end, we've still got rent to pay. We've still got fuel to pay for, all this kind of thing. So when somebody says, it's a bit expensive, isn't it? You go, well, actually, the price of a CD now should be £46.50 if you look at inflation.
Inflation rates, yeah.
Exactly. So inflation's been fine for all your wages, you know. So why doesn't it have any consequence with ours, you know? And these are the things that you have to work against. And what we've tried to do, I know we've put our prices up, you know, our CD's £20. To be honest, we've had very little complaint in the way of complaints, because we try and make a great product for that £20, which is what, 4 cups of espresso in Starbucks, you know. So that's the way you have to look at it. You know, I saw somebody did a post the other day and said, I used to go and buy LPs from the shop in town when I was a kid, and I used to have to save all week to make enough money to buy the LP, you know. And that isn't the case anymore. You know, if it's just throwaway, then also it's not. I think somebody said that the Tool album that came out, they could have made more money from the album working in Tesco's than actually putting it out on digital release, you know. So I think we have to put value back into music. It's really, really important that we do that, you know.
Definitely. It's something that's, like you say, it's too throwaway. It's I'm old. I'm old. I'm just old these days. I tell to my cousins and stuff, and they're like, I was chatting to my cousins' kids the other week. And obviously, I haven't seen them for a while. We're catching up and stuff, and we're talking about stuff. And they said to me, "Oh, what have you been up to?" And I finally got, because me and wife Jo bought this house a couple of years ago, and never got myself sort of. I did have a vinyl player at home, but it was old. I had it since I was a teenager, and it was sort of broken. And he finally got me a new vinyl player sorted out, blah blah. And I was saying to my cousin's kid, like, "Oh, I've got this vinyl player," and he's like, you know, what's a vinyl? And I'm like, what? And then I was like, well, and I'm going, well, you know, you CDs, and I don't use them. And I'm like, and he's like, well, why have you got it there? Why don't you just download it? And I'm like, because it's not the same. And I don't. It goes back to wanting to support artists and being a music fan. I like to sit and look. And there's nothing better to me than soaking up an album. And to me, you can't do that like it on Spotify or whatever other streaming service. You can to a certain extent. I've listened to stuff when I've, you know, been sent stuff for the radio show or whatever, or I've been at the gym and it's handy for that and stick my earphones in or whatever. But equally, blasting out music properly and really soaking it up is one of my biggest pleasures.
In a way, there needs to be two different things. There's music and the music business, you know. And if you look at the music business at the moment, it is fairly lowest common denominator based. So, you know, it's going to be the cheapest records to make. It's going to be very little in the way of content, depth, substance, that kind of thing. But it might be great to work out to in the gym, you know, and it might be great, you know, if you've got to go for a run or, you know, any of these things where you don't have to think about it. But, you know, the thing that we get when we we released an album is somebody will, well, lots of people will get in touch with us and say, why am I crying? You know, and that's the thing is, you know, why the hair's all just gone up on the back of my arm and the back of my neck. And that's what we do. That's what we've trained to do. That's what we try and do with everything that we make. Don't always succeed. And of course, the other thing that you have to bring into play here is that, yeah, we have to live. We have to live. Musicians have to live. They can't download petrol. They can't download groceries. You know, nothing is free except their music. You know, well, also it totally works the other way around. Because we're independent, people come and buy straight from us. But generally, if you're a musician, you sell it onto a record company, you sell it on somebody else, you know. So everyone else takes their cut before you get anything. So in the end, it's what's left is what goes to you. And quite often that isn't very much. So I do think that, you know, that there has to be a way of the general public seeing that this is the case, and that, you know, unless you don't want to have any professional musicians, which is possible from a governmental point of view, I don't know. But, you know, unless you'd rather it was a hobby, then people aren't going to put the same work ethic into music in the way that we do. And there's one other point with all of this, is that unlike having to buy food or petrol or whatever, you have a choice. You don't have to buy it, you know. So that's the thing, is somebody says to me, well, your album's too expensive. Well, don't buy it then, you know. It's only if it means enough to you that the work that we've put in is strong enough that you think it's worth that money. And it will pay you back, we think, many times over the years, and it will be with you there. It will be with you far longer than those 4 cups of coffee that it costs, you know. So that's the way that we look at it.
Yeah, I think you're right there, John, for sure. I mean, there's just some really scary statistics. I remember I'm a big Gary Newman fan as well, and I saw an interview with him a couple of months ago, talking about things, and he was saying that I can't remember what song he was on about, but one track of his had got something ridiculous, like over 1 million plays on Spotify, and he got a check for 35 quid.
Yeah.
And you're like, how is that right at all? And like, you know, when an artist puts soul and passion and drive and everything that goes in before making that particular song, all the gigs where they, you know, they paid to 3 men at a dog and got paid 4 pints of ale, and you know, and being in the back of a van, and I've done that side of things. I never got professional, but you know, being back in the van when you go, you travel up to the other side of England for a 40-minute set and then go home and all that kind of thing, where you are completely busted out. And
We
then
still do it,
yeah.
you know. I mean, I do work for sort of, yeah, and my professional side of it, I suppose, in terms of getting paid, is that I work for some of the larger artists, and that's great. And you get on a jet and you go, and everybody looks after you, and you're fine. But the thing is, with Lifesigns, it's just the same as it was when I was 18. You know, we just all jump in the back of, or we'll have our cars, but everything will go in the back of a van, and then we'll be off somewhere else, and then no sleep, and then we have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to drive to an airport to get to a festival to go and come back. You know, and in the end, you know, it's not massive money, so you just kind of share out beer money between you at the end when you're done. So I get all of that. I understand all of that. But it is important, you know, it's a way of life. And it's a way of life that seems, especially through these COVID times, to be disappearing. I've lost a few friends over this last year, and also I know a lot of friends who've quit the industry. You know, and it's like it's almost not a job anymore, not a proper job. You know, and yet when we've taken people out on the road with us, they've said, "I've never worked this hard in my life," and we've gone, "No, exactly. That's exactly." So hence the reason that I'm only actually 27, but it's
you still got more hair than me, mate.
It's all done by trickery, don't worry. Yeah, it's, you know, it's an interesting, it'll be interesting to see how things move forward. So I do think we miss having something that, let's give you an example, just one example. We finished the show in Manchester, and when we finished, as is quite commonplace, the DJ comes in afterwards, and you know, it's drum and bass, whatever, and the kids come in after you've finished, and so there's a change of bar staff, there's a change of audience, and whatever. Well, we'd had quite a good gig, and the place was pretty rammed, and we went on a bit long. They said it was okay, they were fine. So I think we went on like half an hour longer than we should have done. So obviously the new bar staff came in, and the kids came in for the thing and saw the end of our show. They pinned us to the wall after the show and said, "What was that? We've never seen anything like that. What is it? It was wonderful. I want to know where I can get this." You know,
that's amazing.
They had absolutely no idea, because what they're fed from the mainstream doesn't show them what we do. You know? It's almost like we're prisoners, you know, to an extent that we can't get out into that sea. Because I'm sure, yeah, it's not just us, it's loads of people, you know. But I'm sure with if the album was given a fair shout on mainstream radio, you know, we'd be working at a much different level to the one that we do work at.
So I think though, isn't it? If your music is given a chance to reach those audiences, you're not going to get a whole 100%. No one ever does. But the 10-15% that you might get of people is a substantial number of people.
Oh, without doubt. Somebody said to me, "Do you want to be famous?" I said, "No, I just want to be heard." You know, it's simple. You can decide what you think of it then. I said, "But we'd just like to be heard." And that's people like you giving us that chance, Lee. So it's great. It's good.
Mine's independent radio show, local station, mate. I just play what I want for 2 hours, and if anybody wants to tune in, then that's good.
I tell you what, there's a lot of major DJs up and down the country who'd kill for that opportunity. You know, they can't do it. You know, I've spoken to people at you know, whether it's rock radio, whether it's, you know, the BBCs of this world, whatever, everything is playlisted to the nth degree. You know, and so how do you you know, get enthusiasm for that? I don't know. So there's a new radio station with Mike Reed and a whole bunch of other people that seems to have started up, where it didn't sound particularly playlisted. I mean, they were playing like, you know, tracks off Alice Cooper albums and stuff like that. this is cool. I quite like this. So
Yeah.
you never know. There's always hope. There's always hope. But I think
Always
anyone bucks the trend, I think there'll be a tsunami. I think that's what will happen. So
just needed to break through.
Yeah, exactly. Or we can do an ABBA cover. I don't mind. It's not a problem.
So, are there any songs on the album in particular that you're looking forward to hearing people's responses to, or any favourites when you're writing? Or
I don't. I think we've done pretty well already. Really, we did put a little poll up because we have a thing on Facebook called L'Esprit de Corps, which is for people who've bought into it. Yeah, and I think Altitude came top, and then it was it Altitude came top or Last One Home? I can't remember, one of those two, and then I think the next one was Ivory Tower. So it's quite interesting because probably the more difficult numbers are Fortitude and Shoreline. So, but I'm looking forward to seeing those live. Going back to the Zoltan thing, I remember when Dave Bainbridge said to me, I know this drummer, he's really good. He was in the Flower Kings, he's played with, guys from like Randy Brecker and all this kind of stuff, amazing jazz drummer. He's even worked with Quincy Jones, for goodness sake,
wow.
So yeah, all right, let's give it a go, So we sent out to various different drummers, and these were all great drummers. We've been very fortunate that nobody's ever really turned us down. They've all wanted to have a go. So we sent out these bits and bobs to, and the drummers were getting back to us one after another and going, well, give it 2 weeks. It was the track N from Cardington. They said, give it 2 weeks, we'll get back to you with something. And Zoltan came back 3 hours later. Nice. And it was like, yeah, no sweat, and it was just woof. Okay, that worked. So it was a bit like, okay, you start Monday, and that was it. And I just think he's brought something very beautiful to what we do. And we've been very lucky. Frosty was brilliant. The band's always been great. People involved in it have always been lovely. But the thing we have to remember with the band is that for everyone, really, we're not their day job. They work with other major artists. So I've said, in a way, I've done a couple of interviews where I've said, well, it's like a revolving door to an extent. John Paul's been in the band since Nick left after the first album. And Dave's been in now for 4 years, whatever. But really, it's only if they can fit it in, and we fully understand if they have something that comes in that's more important. So, we've been very lucky to get this far, considering, but I think it's, so far it's stood us in good stead.
You touched on live things there, obviously with the live scene supposedly you're making a return. Have you got any plans for the tour in support of this yet, or are you hanging fire and seeing what happens?
For me personally, we have a date penciled in with Big Train, and we're just waiting to see what will happen there. I've no idea. That's in July. But for me personally, with everything else, I've kind of held off because I want to see what's what happens in terms of rules for venues. It's one thing saying that we can do something or we can play somewhere. Will anyone want to come? We have to make sure that everyone feels comfortable in the space. And obviously, I think it'll probably be a bit like the airlines with vaccination certificates and that kind of stuff. And, just making sure that nobody's spreading anything so that you can go in and have that experience that you had once before. Now, as to when that happens is a good question. And as to when everyone will be ready for it is another. And the other thing that we have to look at from Lifesigns' point of view is what all our day jobs will be doing at that point. Because, if there's European tours, American tours, whatever, we have to work our way around that. So that's how it works.
Makes sense. So at the beginning of the interview, I'm going to play Ivory Tower because I've mentioned that's a favourite of mine on the album. What song would you like us to play at the end of the interview? And
I suppose really, if you're playing Ivory Tower, then I would imagine one of the bigger ones, so maybe Fortitude. I don't know, because I think Ivory Tower is probably a bit like Last One Home, although Last One Home is obviously really a favourite for people. So I just look at it. Whatever makes you happy.
You're too kind, mate. You're too kind.
Yeah, that's just me getting a cop out, really, rather than anything else. Yeah, I don't know. It's very hard. I'm fond of all of them. Ivory Tower and Last One Home have been around a while. in terms of songs. I mean, I wrote Last One Home many years ago, and we even played it with a version of a band called Quango that was John Wetton and Carl Palmer and Dave Kilminster.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it was kind of, we did ELP and Asia stuff, and John's always like, sorry, rest his soul, always liked that song. So yeah, that was one that we played. And Ivory Tower was kind of down to Steve, really, because Steve said, I'd really like to put that one on the album. So what we've tended to do with all the albums is pick a couple of old ones that nobody knows, because basically the market for it was very small, and then, you know, release that on the unsuspecting world, and then somebody will go, oh, I think I saw you play that live on your own in a pub in 1990, whatever, you know. It's very true, and probably wasn't worth remembering. So it's just
all right, mate. Well, cheers for this, John. It's been a pleasure, buddy.
Well, welcome, Lee. Been really good fun. Thank you, mate.
No, pleasure's been all mine, mate. Cheers.
Cheers for that.